Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Legal Talk Show, proudly brought to you by Say What at the studio of choice. Now, our episode for today is very special as we are commemorating the International Day of the African Child, and the theme for this year is eliminating harmful practices affecting children, progress on policy and practice since 2013. Joining me is a powerful panel, and I will ask them to introduce themselves, starting with the gentleman to my right.
Hello everyone, my name is Alista. I'm the Child Protection Officer for Say What.
Thank you so much, Alista.
Hello everyone, my name is Victor Chirumota. I'm a child rights practitioner with Mdo Foundation.
Right.
Hello everyone, my name is Alexa Janet Sombrero. I'm a peer educator under HIT Say What.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. Now, we're talking about harmful practices. Maybe, Alista, you work with the Say What call center, and I'm pretty sure, received phone calls that are to do with harmful practices. So maybe for the benefit of those who are watching, you can highlight on some of these particular harmful practices that you've heard of.
So thank you very much, Ida. So I'm just going to highlight a few things. So for something to be called harmful, usually it's being done against someone's will.
Okay.
You understand? Some people, they internalize these behaviors and they think it's normal because maybe it's coming from a cultural perspective. But I'd like to say we have received a lot of calls, maybe around forced marriages, talking about, early child marriages, also talking about issues. Some of these things, they might not sound real, but they are there. You get mono anonzi arumiswa mazamu nekamikamuka so that they get big. That's the harmful practice. You get munanoro anemukoti kuti mazamu sakuri. That's another harmful practice. But we would like to draw more on child marriages because we have people being forced to get into marriages for a lot of reasons. Some might be religious, some might be cultural, but at the end of the day, anything which is being done against someone's will usually is harmful. And usually this affects the psychosocial development of a person, especially children. It affects a lot of things. I'm talking about even the psychomotor development, even the cognitive development. It's way too affected by the cultural practice being perpetrated against the children.
All right, thank you so much. And maybe focusing on the second element of the theme, which says progress on policy and practice since 2013. Maybe I'll direct this question to you. What has been done since 2013 in terms of policies that address some of these harmful practices?
Firstly, we look at the introduction of the new constitution in 2013,
yes,
which really guarantees the child's right to life, freedom from the inhumane and degrading treatment, the right to the highest attainable standard of health, and the right to dignity, which are really enshrined within the Constitution. And also, also looking at the framework, I think Section 81 of the Constitution as well, which guarantees a full list of child rights. In terms of policies, we've seen the recent enactment of laws, the New Marriage Acts, which is trying to safeguard against child marriage, among other pieces of legislative instruments. I see already with the Child Justice Bill as well, that's trying to safeguard children, and that's also on discussion, it's something that's coming out. I'll say though that we still have a very long way to go in protecting children from harmful practices. I'll be keen on seeing a bill that specifically, denounces some of these practices. I would think, in my view, mostly the cultural law of damages. Beside damage, then next thing, it's just that, there's no prosecution, there's nothing. The child's rights are not being safeguarded, and we like to call it the commercialization of the virginity of girls. We hate it.
All right, thank you so much. And maybe I'll ask you a question from a student perspective. Are there any harmful practices that you see being done maybe at institution level, like things that you see on a daily at school and you're like, how this is not supposed to be happening?
Okay, so personally, I think before we go anywhere, the issue of being aware that I'm being violated is still a problem. I might not know that I'm being violated, yet I'm being violated, you see. So the first thing that we need to work on is making sure I'm aware that this is not supposed to be happening to me. This is supposed to be, I'm supposed to be protected against such acts. So you'd find, Kuti, when you're at school, there are cases where you're like, why is this happening? Let's take, for example, it's easy for me to fall prey to sexual abuse or drug abuse because we're at school. You think, no, we're having fun as students, it's the in thing, but then you don't know that you're actually being violated. It's not something that's supposed to be happening to you. You understand? So personally, I feel like we have to know first our rights as students, our rights as children, so that we get to know that, no, this is a violation against my rights, so I should report this case or I should not.
All right. So there's this issue where some of these practices are deemed as tradition. I'll give, for example, something that you said about the issue of breasts, where mukadzano mwanano nemgoti kuti anzi mabreasts ake asakure. Some people see it as tradition, they don't see it as harmful. So how then do we separate it and make people aware of the fact that yes, it may be tradition, but it doesn't take away the fact that it's violating the child's rights? How can we strategically address that without then discarding the issue of tradition altogether and being like, no, it's not tradition, let's remove it altogether? How do we strategically stop the conversation?
A quote, I found it funny, they said, culture and tradition are peer pressure from the ancestors. In other words, these are things that were put in by people who are no longer, within the existing society, but it's things that have been passed down from generation to generation.
Okay.
And these things are not cast in stone. They are not immovable. These things can be amended. Where culture is harmful, where culture is bringing distraction and problems to the best rights and best interests of the children, these practices should be abolished. It is also within even the constitutional framework to say, you know what, any practice that is inconsistent with the constitution should be abolished. So I think, there's no rule that says we can't amend culture. It can be amended.
All right. Do you have anything else to add?
Yes, also on the note, like what Victor just highlighted, remember, culture is dynamic.
Yeah.
It's not stagnant. So it simply means that we improvise, looking at the contemporary situation. Remember, back in the days, we have things like Msengambere, happening, but now there's abduction. You can just take a person and take them. There's kidnapping, and it has to be charged as kidnapping.
Yeah.
So I think it's dynamic, and we need to get to a point where you accept that this can no longer take place. Due to the circumstances, like actually the legal provisions, abolishing this thing. So I think that should be the correct stand.
Yeah.
All right. Do not forget to comment, share with us your views and perceptions of the issue. Dear African children, what do you want us to address in terms of harmful practices that are happening out there? I think maybe my last question before we take a break would be directed to our student here. Do you feel that as it stands, from a legal perspective, we are addressing any other harmful practices aside from child marriage?
Not really. Not really. Because there's this case of child labor. I'm not sure how prevalent it is actually, but I feel like society doesn't know how to distinguish between child labor and child work. Okay. There's a very thin line between child labor and child work. So the thing is, you might see it as work. Maybe it's my chores in the morning. I'm waking up, but then I can't expect to see a 5-year-old achituma kumvura 20-liter bucket. Now that's child labor. But if you give me that bucket, it's child work. You see. So I feel like there is need to really address the issue and make people see that there really is a difference between child labor and child work.
All right.
I just want to say something on that. I think we need to understand our African context. There are chores that a child does at home.
Yes.
Maybe within the child work at home, of course, it has to be in proportion. I don't think it would be reasonable to give a 5-year-old this bucket of 20 liters and everything, given the child's frame and everything. But that should not be considered to be child labor. Because child labor now is attached to an economic benefit. So, for example, we find all those children on the streets. It's a Monday morning, they're supposed to be in school. but they're not taking so much toothbrush and everything.
Yeah.
A lot of times we see these things every day. It's happening,
Yeah,
they're
it's
there,
happening.
It's a Wednesday afternoon, it's 12 p.m. This one is in town, and then the mother is sitting at the corner there. They're using this child for economic benefit. And, these are some of the, because these things are we see them every day. But I think a lot of times we just don't know how to properly define what's happening. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for that. We are taking a quick break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. Today's episode, like I mentioned before, it's very special, where we are commemorating the International Day of the African Child. And in this episode, we are unpacking the theme, which reads Eliminating Harmful Practices Affecting Children, Progress on Policy and Practice since 2013. Now, do not forget to converse with us in the comment section. Share with us your views and perspectives. And please do not forget, if you know anyone who is being abused or anyone who wants knowledge on SRS issues, our toll-free number is 577. Do not hesitate to get in touch with us. So when we were on our break, I was just thinking, most of these harmful practices, when we talk about them, they mainly highlight issues that affect the girl child. So are there any particular harmful practices that are affecting the boy child?
Yes, I would like to indicate that there are some cultures who actually perpetrate some behaviors sexually on men. Okay. I'm talking of male circumcision. This might be done outside the normal way we know when you start doing it. But there is done maybe musango when they get to be circumcised using a lot of jimiti and all that. I would want to directly delve into the process because it might be provocative to other cultures, but there are things like that happening where circumcision takes place in a non-clinical environment, without proper, proper material. I don't know how to put it across, but without proper medication, the diwaguzor and all that, but people just go through circumcision, and this happens behind doors, and we don't know what's going to happen after, the foreskin and all that, the healing. A lot of people, this actually is a major cause of depression, among others, because remember, this child is actually going to go back to school probably on Monday after this process, and he does not feel like it's just like another children. Already he has been alienated from the community because of something like that.
Okay. Wow. That is a lot to take in. Any other practices that are affecting the boy child?
I'll not add to what Alistair is saying. I mean, just within the context of just initiation processes, for boys when they reach the mid-age of puberty, adolescence, when they enter adolescence. And it's yes, circumcision is one of those things, but there's even all these perpetration and ingraining of toxic masculinity,
yes.
Behavior. So it's within some bush somewhere that a young boy has to be taught how to be a man, and that's according to a script that is not maybe essentially friendly to the gender discourse and to how one should view women. So a man is brought up to behave a certain way, but coming from a harmful practice. And the problem with that is because they've been cultured to think a certain way. When they now come back to interface with the rest of us, with the rest of the world, their thought processes are just fueled by what they've been taught before. So you find that you also find even issues around to do with sexual initiation as well. I know of cases, of course, within I think it's South thereabouts. I'm not too sure what province it is per se, but where you find all these initiation processes. There's maybe an older woman who's supposed to teach these young men on how to have sex and everything, and that is without the general understanding of how HIV spreads, and how if you have unsterilized medical equipment and everything, how does this affect the health of the young men in the long run?
All right, okay. And then, whilst I think we're on the same issue, there's this, I don't know if I can deem it as a harmful practice or it's just tradition, but the thing where there's preference of the son in comparison to the daughter, where if you have your firstborn child as a daughter, they don't celebrate you as much. But when it's a son, they will buy you a goat, a cow, a wardrobe, a car in some instances. So can that be deemed as a harmful practice?
I think it is. I mean, if you ask, I think your average guy, what do they want their first child to be? You know, they want their first child to be a boy. And why is that? Because that's how we've been brought up to think. You know, I want a son. I want 3 sons. Maybe I have 1 daughter. And why? Because we just brought up to think, but girls are problematic in terms of raising them. And also Mitisiwa, and also in the role where they are of no benefit to us. And one way or the other, you see these traits, you know, throughout how people raise their children. So the boys get better access to education because, you know, they deemed to benefit the family. The girls are always on the sidelines since, anyway, why would we take you to school, you know, general role anyway, you know. So some preference really is. And Kakawanda culture even have stories of women who are being divorced because she only gave birth to girls, you know. It's not up to her, you know. So it actually is a root cause of violence, I would say.
Okay, and maybe from a female perspective, how do you feel that this son preference has affected women out there? Because it is affecting us, definitely.
Yeah, it is. I feel like mentally we start feeling like we're not important enough, or we're not, you know, we're not supposed to be here. We're not supposed to be doing something for ourselves. I strongly believe that the future is female. I don't know about you guys. So we have the capacity to be like boys. We have the ability. You find girls that are more intelligent than boys out there. But then still when you're back to culture, it's like boys are now more superior than us. They're more, you know, special, so to speak. So you find that there are cases where maybe there's the passing on of a parent and they're supposed to share, you know, the format. If you notice, most of these things go to boys. It's like they're saying, these are the people that are going to use these things. But then I'm here, I also need that. I also need to go to school so that I become something for myself, so that I create a name for myself, besides the fact that I'm part of the family. So you realize that we tend to feel inferior. We tend to feel like we're not suitable to try some things because it's a guy's game. So mentally, it's very disturbing. It's very disturbing, yeah.
Thank you so much, and I agree with you where you said the future is female. Don't argue with me, just go with the flow. Okay, we're taking another quick short break. Do stay with us. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are live at the Say What studio of choice, unpacking this year's theme for the International Day of the African Child. Now, as we wrap up, maybe I'll address each of you on an individual perspective. Alistair, you work with the Say What call center, and maybe from your perspective and from the call center's perspective, what do you feel needs to be done in addressing these harmful practices? What efforts can be put in place by you, by other call centers, by CSOs and any other stakeholders that can make sure that we address this issue?
Okay, so thank you very much, Chido. So I would like to first say the first stance to take is to take every concern being raised by a child very seriously. Remember, children are vulnerable. They might not be able to continue if we don't respond at first. So when they raise concerns, let's try by all means to make sure that these concerns are addressed timely. Like, we need real-time solutions to these problems. I'll just, highlight a few cases which I've received from call center. I would like to point out issues around medication. We've had cases where neighbors, not children per se, but neighbors being calling us and say, next door there's a family from this church and they are not taking their children to see doctors, and recently we had one child passed away because of this and that. Now, this is a concern coming from a neighbor. which simply means within that same community, the same family, one children might not be able to, to elaborate and say, look, this is what's happening here. I'm not able to do that. So if in the community we see cases like that, we should be able to voice out. We might, we have DSD, Department of Social Welfare there, we have Madiwa, Center for Children's Rights, we have Say What 577, we have Shout Line, we have Plant International, we have a lot of other organizations which we can just reach out to. So these organizations like Plant International, World Vision, they don't work in isolation. They work together with other organizations. So it's actually easier if we have coordinated approaches to addressing these issues being raised by children, and allow them to utilize these toll-frees to address their issues. Remember, these children might not be able to report at school because maybe the perpetrators there at school, we're talking about bullying is happening at school, they might not be also to report at home because maybe the father or the mother is the perpetrator. But if you see as a neighbor, it's actually easy to identify a child who's being abused, from a lot of traits which can be elaborated in other sessions also. But when these things happen, let's be very comfortable, let's be very warm, welcoming to children, to allow them to voice out what's happening. Creating awareness has been our mode of responding, but creating awareness does not solve the problem. We are just creating awareness. We need to respond when we create the awareness, because now we've created awareness and people now know, but what are we doing as service providers to help these children? Let's respond timely. Real-time solutions always provide the best.
So true. Thank you so much, Alistair. Victor, maybe from a legal perspective, what needs to be done to the existing policies, and maybe what other new policies do we need to introduce so that we tackle this issue head on?
I think the first thing that we need to do really is to revisit the Children's Act.
Yes.
It leaves a lot of gaps, as far as the elimination of harmful practices goes. The challenge with our Zimbabwean legislative framework is that we have pieces of legislation across different acts. So you have within the National Youth Policy something to do with children there, because remember, at some point a child is also regarded as part of the youth. Yes. We have some parts within the National Gender Policy, and it's fragmented. Mm-hmm. We need to have a uniform law. We need to have one comprehensive law, Children's Act, that addresses all these things. Yes. That way, when there's empowering provisions on what we can do, it makes it a lot easier for us to protect children legally. But also at the same time, we also need to challenge existing laws which promote or perpetuate or which are silent on harmful practices against children. We also need to empower our custodians at community level, be it the chiefs, the religious leaders, traditional leaders, the whole lot, for them to also understand what a child-friendly approach to justice looks like. That way, when issues come in, they look at these issues from a justice with dignity approach, which is beneficial to all children.
All right, thank you so much, Victor. And maybe from a peer educator perspective, what would you encourage other peer educators to do in terms of raising awareness on these issues and trying by all means to make sure that we address them from a student perspective?
Okay, so I think as peer educators, we should understand that you're not only a peer educator at school, but also in the community. So if you take your job from school to home, it will really make more impact. At the same time, it's not about talking to a few people today, like, next week. It's constant. You have to keep on reminding people that they have rights. You have to keep on telling them, letting them know, like raising awareness, right? And the other thing is, we should not only consider peer-to-peer interaction, but we should also try talking to parents, letting them know, if you want to plan something for your child, involve your child, because anything for the child without the child is not for the child. Right? So involve them in child participation and decision-making processes in the home and at school, in whatever that affects them. So I think our main agenda is awareness. And we should really do that to the max. And not just because I'm doing it in the area that I'm living in. No, maybe I go Kumusha this December. I should try to get a few, maybe a small number of people, let them know what what's going on out there. Like, give them information. So.
All right, thank you so much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. This was quite an insightful discussion, and I hope that those who were watching picked up a few points and, you know, a few takeaway points that they can definitely utilize on. Thank you so much, audience, for watching. Do not forget to follow us on our social media pages so that you cannot be left out when we have such discussions. Until next time, signing out.